Hi, everybody. Jeff here again with another episode of Essential Essentials. We are trying to bring some topics from church members and beyond that we feel will be encouraging and helpful to you in this time of quarantine. And this evening, we have with us April Skiffen. April, why don't you say hi to everybody?
Hi.
April's a neat friend. We've known each other for I guess it seems like 8 years, something like that.
8 years. Yep.
Is that right? Wow, I got it.
2012. Good job.
Yeah, wow, that was a guess. And April's a really neat person. She's a leader in our church. She oversees a few ministries and slash volunteers in. She's also part of our church financial board, so she helps pray and make those decisions for us. And also has just become a dear friend and traveled to Ukraine with me, which was a special experience. We got to spend a number of days there together. So
4 years
welcome.
ago, right now, by the way.
That was
It was
now.
4
Dang.
years ago, right now.
Oh man. Well, the topic for today is I want to kind of spring off of the scripture, and I believe it's in one of the Timothy's, and it says, "If you have food and clothing, therewith be content." Has been a model of that. I've been really, I've just admired your way of another verse that I really think you really live very well is the one that says, "If I'm have plenty, I'll be fine. If I don't have plenty, I'll be fine." And I really see a consistency in you. So just kind of as we start, and we're going to talk about your experiences living in China and pandemic and fighting the zombies at Costco for toilet paper. But just tell us, just kind of as I share those two verses with the church, just sort of what those make you think of when I those two verses that I just shared.
Well, I think for me in particular, I just, you know, it's kind of like, what do I need? And when we sit and automatically say, look at our budget, for example, and we say, hey, I want to save money for X, or I just want to save money because I want to have a savings account, or I want to pay off my debt, or I just want to be smart with my money. When we start making a list of the things that we need to spend money on every month, and I know I do it, it's like, oh, I need to get whatever, my nails done. I need to get a facial or whatever it might be. And not that those aren't good things, but is it a true need? If I don't get my nails done, if I paint my nails myself, is it going to be just as good? So understanding that really I'm going to be okay and I'm going to be happy. Like whenever I got rid of cable, it was really tough because I was like, well, I have all these shows that I need to watch. The reality was I was paying $10 a month to have DVR to record them and still never watching them. So I was just having this stack of them. And so I realized at one point, if I don't watch those shows, will my life be worse? If I don't have
Yeah.
X, will my life be worse? And so if I can say, no, my life won't be any worse if I don't have that thing, then it's not really a need.
I love how, and I've observed this in your life, it seems to you that it's not even about how much money you're saving. It's less about money. It's more about, is this really something I need? And I like that. It's like, it seems to me that it would be just as easy to drop something that's $10 a month as it would to drop something that's $100 a month or whatever, because it's not about the money. It's about what do I need, and living sort of like needs versus want based rather than what can I afford. I really
Mm-hmm.
see that in what you're saying.
Yeah, and wants are okay. Like, hey, sometimes we say, well, I don't need it, but I choose to spend my money on it. And that's okay. Maybe I cut something else out that I decided wasn't as important.
Yeah. We did a trip to Ohio, a number of the folks in the church, and you were there, I believe. Was that last year, maybe? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We went to Ohio for a vineyard conference and stayed in some Airbnbs, a whole bunch of us. And I just remember then, another thing, I remember that at the beginning we had a 15 passenger van, and I've done a lot of these trips, so I thought to myself, well, I'll go sit in the back because the back kind of sucks, and I'll just kind of sit toward the back and just kind of take the first leg back there, and but before I got back there, you were already back there, And so what that told me, I thought, okay, here's somebody that's used to accommodating others.
Mm,
And, I admired that. And I think that's part of this too. It's like, I'm going to live in a way that sometimes I have to sacrifice accommodating myself. You just described this in your trip of Costco. I go there, but if it's packed, I'm just going to not add to the mess. I'm just going to say, you know what? I'll come back next week.
mm.
That idea of
Yep,
accommodating. Um, so tell us a little bit about China. You lived in China for 3 to 4 years,
about 3.5.
doing nuclear, and you were doing nuclear there.
Yep.
And while you were doing your nuclear, um, you had some neat experiences. And I want to ask you about some specific things, but first of all, just in particular about innovating and adapting, because you went from a place where you could pretty much get 50 different kinds of bread uh, to a place that was very different. So tell us just a little bit about just in general, your trip there. And then I want to talk specifically about, because this all relates to pandemic, needs versus wants. Should I be complaining about A, B, and C? Talk to us a little bit about China.
Yeah, so before I went, I had help from some folks that I knew that had been there and some folks that I didn't know that were there of, hey, I've got 2 large suitcases. Because my first trip was just you get your 2 suitcases, your carry-on, that's it. You're taken for 6 months.
Dang.
What clothes do I take? Because I don't have that much room. And what other things? I mean, I need shampoo. I need face wash. I need,
How many
things like,
outfits can you fit in 2 suitcases? I mean, I don't know this sort of thing.
um, it depends on how you pack them and what else
Okay.
you take, because you've
Right.
got to think about all those other things too that you
I'm
need for
I'm just
shoes,
sure because there's not a Walmart you can drive to and get
No,
a new shirt, right?
no. And especially not when you are an American sized person and you're around a bunch of Chinese sized people and their sizes. Sometimes you can find your size and you're like, oh, I'm a 3X now. Okay. That's apparently what it is. And honestly, shoes, typically they did not, it was very difficult to find my size shoe. I was able to buy some occasionally that were like leather and just fit. I knew would stretch out a little bit. But yeah, you have to, what do I, again, what do I really need to take with me? What's the most important thing? Because I have 2 suitcases. And this might be TMI, but it was very hard to find tampons in China at first. So I actually, the first time I found them was about a year after I'd been there, and it was in Beijing, which was
Dang.
a 5.5 hour high-speed
What?
train ride for me from my city. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I needed space for those
You
for
know,
sure.
we should start a vineyard there, and that could be our gathering tool. We could do a free feminine hygiene outreach
Right,
where
right,
we import all this stuff from America.
right.
It's a servant evangelism. So wow, okay, so adapting. So I mean, little things, and I've been in other cultures for short times, but you were there for years. Just little stuff like talk to us. And again, this all relates to pandemic living, but language. I remember your story about trying to get a taxi to take you somewhere. If a taxi showed up, sort of thing. Tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about just trying to get somewhere. Getting to church, those sorts of things.
So I remember the first time I got in a cab by myself and got to the grocery store, which was about 5 miles away. And it was called Leader Plaza. Lida is how they say it in Chinese. So simple, just get in the cab and say, Chu Lida, to leader, go to leader. I can do that. So I did that. I got there, so excited. I got my groceries, what I could figure out anyway, because nobody there was going to speak English. So if I couldn't find something, you give up.
And just to help people, you don't speak Chinese. You didn't speak much at the beginning.
No, I
Okay.
spoke none. And so then I got there. That was good. There were cabs outside of the grocery store as well, which was great. I didn't have to like walk home because that's what I would have done. If there were no cabs, I would have walked the 5 miles home with my bags. But typically there were some outside the grocery store, but saying the name of the place where I lived was a little bit more difficult. But I nailed it and I got home. And honestly, like it was the most excited I think I've been about anything in a really long time to get to the grocery store and get home because I did it all by myself for the
Wow.
first time. And it seems so silly, but I actually remember I had bought a sweater that day, and then we had a little gathering in the village that night with coworkers, and somebody said, "Oh, it's a really nice sweater," and I said, "I bought it today at Leader all by myself," and they were like, "That's a really big deal," and I was like, "I know," like I was so
Wow.
excited. So yeah, I mean, simple things like that that we take for granted because I didn't have a car, and here it's easy. You get on Uber, maybe if you don't have a car, on you know, any Lyft or whatever. I was going to say DD, that's the Chinese one. But it, it, the app in China was all in Chinese. So it's not that simple. And I lived out in the country away from a lot of things. So a lot of times they didn't even want to come out if you tried to call a cab. They didn't
Man,
want to come all the way out there. So yeah, it really was something that you had to plan ahead was the big thing. Okay, there
right.
were two free buses to the grocery store that I found out about. One at 9:30, I think, and one at 5:30. So if you wanted to get on the bus where you didn't have to worry about a car, then you got to be there at one of those two times. And they left right at 5:30. So you know, or again, if you get a
Mm,
cab, if there is one out there, you got to be able to say um, where you're going, and you know, just essentially it comes down to planning ahead. And what do I need? I better not forget, because if I forget to get something, it's like a whole process to get back there.
right.
So
So,
we
wow, good.
yeah, I was just going to say we did have a small, we called it Leader Junior or Little Leader in our village. It was about a 2-minute walk away. It was just like a very miniature version of it. So they did have some things there. I was able to get every few days. So I wasn't, you know, only had that big one, then it was difficult to get to. We did have another smaller option, but
Mm.
very limited. You were then, you know, whatever they had there is what you got.
So, and I want to talk about that in a minute. I want to go back to something that you said. So, needs versus wants. So, that obviously is a need. Like, you need clothing, you need shoes if yours wear out, you need food. But then wants, like, so we're kind of in a culture where right now we're still, to be quite honest, allowed to have most of our wants. Um, we are getting most of our needs, if not all of them, uh, but we're still also getting most of our wants. But you were in a situation where to get a want was a lot more difficult. So you kind of had to survive the needs. And I'm reminded of your story of getting to church. Would you just, for those that didn't hear this a couple of years ago when I imported you for a sermon, just give us describe, here going to church, and of course we can't go to church now, but we can do this, and it's still, to me, this is still amazing. I'm shocked every time, as weird as it is, that we can live stream a sermon and worship to people. Like, this is incredible. But I want to you were telling the story about getting up in the dark and traveling. I think it was like a 20-minute drive to church, right?
Yeah, it was super easy. It was really tough. Um, yeah, so when I first got to China, actually, for about the first year and a half that I was there, including my short-term assignment, the only church that I knew about was in actually was about 20 minutes away from me, but it was all in Chinese.
Okay.
And especially then, my Chinese, I went a couple of times with some friends, and it was an incredible experience to be the part of it, because you're in a place where they can worship freely but not really. So, you know, they're very, you know, they're not really sure about new people that come in, and especially foreigners. Like, there weren't foreigners in my town except for like the people at the nuclear plant. So, you know, to see us, I mean, they were very welcoming, but it made them a little uneasy. So it was just a really neat experience to be a part of. But again, my purpose was not just to go and see the Chinese people; it was to have church. So,
Right.
plus, I honest didn't really know how to get there. I would have had to set up a car. I would have had to tell a driver how to get me there. So I went a few times with my friends who went occasionally, and then about a year into my assignment, I did find out from my friend who lived in a town a few hours away. Her husband worked with me, and her and her kids lived in that city, so they could go to an international school.
Okay.
She said, "Hey, you know, there's a big expat community here. There's a lot of foreigners. There's this church I found out about. Somebody had invited her." She said, "I think it would be, I know that's really important to you."
Mm.
Up until that point, I just had to figure it out on my own. like lived for Monday mornings when I woke up in China and had my iPod where I could download your sermon because that was my church. And if it
That's
didn't work,
amazing. I mean, that is amazing. I mean, on a lot of levels, but just to be able to hear a sermon in English, and you could go to YouTube and hear a million sermons, but this was about your community, your friends, your familiarity. That just speaks a
yep,
lot on a lot of levels about how important church community is and was for you. So
right,
Monday morning, but then getting to that church, that English speaking church with English speaking songs where I think you eventually served,
yep,
that was an ordeal that was several hours long one way, if I remember, and also
correct.
cost you money.
Correct. So I didn't go for months because I didn't even know where to begin how to get there. And then I learned that there was a bus to the airport in that city. It was about an that so the bus to the airport was about an hour and 15 minutes. The, but then I was still an hour away from church. So I found out from some friends, hey, well, you can take the bus to the airport. And okay, well, then I can get a cab from the airport, I guess. Oh, no, there's another bus that goes and it drops you off at this place. I'm like, well, that's like right by the church. They're like, yeah. So it took me about 3 hours and 15 minutes to get there because I had to get a car in the morning to the bus station. The bus only left like every hour and a half. So I had to get there to line up with the next set of buses to get from the airport into the city and then walk about it was probably about 15 or so minutes, 20 minutes to get to the church. Um, and it was about the equivalent of $30 one way to do that. Now, I could have hired a driver and had them take me directly there. It would have been more like 2 hours and bring me home, but it would have cost me about $100 round trip every single week. And at that point, it wasn't even that. Sure, I could have afforded that. I just couldn't see spending that much money on it when I had these other means of
Right.
transportation. And occasionally I did it if I had to, if there was issues with public transportation, but it was a godsend to me. It was
Wow.
something that I needed. And honestly, that 3 hours and 15 minutes on buses where I would get sleep, and I could read, I could catch up on things that I had been working on, for like I was doing Vineyard Institute. So I could read for a significant amount of time, and honestly, it was just time alone away from everything work because I lived, worked, did life with all of my coworkers. And so I was
Right.
surrounded by work constantly. So going out there got me it. Nobody talked to me about AP 1000 and Westinghouse and nuclear power. I mean, they might ask me what I
Right.
do, but they'd be like, oh wow, okay, cool. And that's like kind of where it ended.
Right.
And I didn't have to be that engineer like I was every other day of the week. So and
Mm,
then add into that just the fact that it was church and I was able to attend a service where
wow.
I could talk to people in English and I could understand the sermon and I could
Yeah.
worship with them. It just it was it, it was a need. It was a need,
Wow.
and honestly it was an answer to prayer.
And I mean, it was a whole day thing. I mean,
Yeah,
that was all day getting there, the service, and then getting back. I mean, so that says something about, what will it take me to get this? And then, I also, just the idea of, when I heard people, and I include myself in this, begin to become frustrated to the fact that we can't meet anymore and have our blue creamer and put our kids in that room for an hour and a half. I just, I think of the martyrs. I think of the person. I think of a situation like the one that you described, and I think, maybe there's a lesson there for us about our attitude about, it's like, why am I fussing and whining about something that I was never owed, and it was a want, it was not a need. I mean, we need church, but church is a blessing. It's a privilege and an honor to have it and to be able to freely worship. And so when these things that we take for granted, they're taken away from us, and we don't realize that there's a lot of the world, that it's just not as easy as getting in your car and driving, 9 miles in my case, to a church building and seeing all these wonderful people. I love that story, April.
Yeah, and when before I had that, and I did have your sermons, but there were times where maybe it didn't record or my VPN was down and I couldn't get it. It
Mm,
wouldn't download onto my iPod. I relied heavily on my Bible. I've got my Bible
wow.
and I've got myself.
Yeah.
I actually started hosting women's Bible studies in my apartment for other women in the village because it was a way to have that community before I had it. And they continued the whole time I was there, even when I started going to church. But
Cool.
it just became this necessity of how do I have it then?
Yeah.
Now I'm in charge. I have to
Right.
make
Right.
sure I get it.
Yeah, that really brings me to my next point. I've got notes here for anyone that thinks I'm playing Scrabble. Well, I am playing Scrabble actually, but no, I'm kidding. Um, so just what you just said, the idea of like innovating, like, okay, well, I can't do this way anymore, so I'm going to, instead of sit here, and watch reruns of whatever, I'm going to find a way to innovate and adapt, which is really what we have to do now in this time of pandemic. Just speak briefly. I remember you said something years ago about just the adventure of getting groceries and meal planning, because it wasn't like here in America where you make a list based on what you want and then you go get it. It was more like, I'm going to show up, see what's there, and from that plan a menu. I mean, sometimes there weren't basic things you wanted, right? And you didn't have a choice of all these different meats and breads.
Yes. So, like I said, we had the Leader Junior in our village, and it was really convenient. It wasn't like a convenience store because they had produce and they had, which I think some convenience stores now have that too, but it really was like a very mini supermarket, which doesn't make sense, mini supermarket. Anyway, um, so I was able to go there every few days and get things. And typically I got my chicken there because they would have a couple chicken breasts nice and packaged. I got my eggs there because they were actually in cartons and not in like a bag like at some of the stores. And even if they were there, I only had to walk them home. I wouldn't have to like really transport. And then they had produce too. So, but again, I would go there with in my mind what I wanted, like chicken, eggs, or what I considered needed. I need chicken. I'm almost out of that, almost out of eggs and I'd like some bananas and maybe some apples and then you show up and you're like, well, there's some dragon fruit. Okay, I like dragon fruit. I'll get some of that. And there's no chicken, so I guess I'm gonna try again for that tomorrow. And oh, good, they have eggs. And some days maybe you caught it right after they stocked. Other days you're like, well, everybody else came and ransacked the place already, and it's like honestly, some of the stuff's like, I don't know what this is. Should I just buy it and try it? I don't know. I need food. What do I have? What do I have? Actually, if I was with a Chinese friend, or even sometimes a foreign friend, I'd be like, do you know what this is? Like, how do I cook it? What do I do with it? Maybe I'll just buy it. I don't know. I need food. I'm not gonna
Oh my
starve.
gosh.
So, but yeah. And then I remember one time, typically eggs weren't a problem. They usually there was an egg shortage or something. And I went the one day and no eggs. And it's like, okay, well, I still have a couple left. So I'll try again tomorrow. No eggs. And the third day I went, and now I'm out of eggs and no eggs. And so I used my finest Chinese that I could and asked, hey, when are you going to get eggs? And and of course she just looked at me like I was crazy because she thought I was speaking English to her. And then she realized what I was saying. She's like, oh, we don't have any in Chinese. And I said, yeah, when? And she said, oh, tomorrow. I'm like, okay. And was I going to starve to death without eggs? Absolutely not. And when you say about being innovative and overcoming it, it's like that. It's like, okay, I eat an egg every day for breakfast. What do I have? Well, I know I have some oatmeal that I brought back from the United States with me for emergency situations. So, okay, I know I have that. I can eat that if I run out of stuff.
Mm,
What else do I have in my apartment? The chicken. I know that they probably have chicken at the big one down the road, but I can't get there right now because there's not going to be any
mm,
cars at 7 o'clock at night. There won't be cars out there to take me. So, okay, I'm probably going to run out of chicken. What else do I have? Well, there's some fish here. I could buy some fish. I like fish. Okay. Or maybe I
mhm.
still have some of that. So, just really thinking about what do I have? Honestly, if I get desperate, I would bring like protein powder and stuff from the United States because I worked out a lot. So I'd be like, all else fails and I need protein,
Right.
I got protein
I
powder.
can live on this.
Yes.
I love that story just because it speaks so much. I mean, this isn't something you did for 3 months. This is something you did for years, year upon year. And the other day we've been doing the pickup groceries, and so they just put it in your trunk, no contact. You pay already prepaid. We get home and we're unboxing everything. There's this excitement that's like, what, wow, we got milk, and
Yeah.
we got orange juice this week, and stuff. And we ordered bananas, and we opened the bag, and there's one banana. So we bust out laughing, like, what's the story? Was this the last banana at Kroger? Like, or were they joking? Are they like piling it up, like, let's give this Miller family one banana? But just the funniness of, for the last 24 years being married, when we get bananas, I get a stock of 8 bananas or whatever, and I can make it banana pudding and banana milkshakes and bananas and like frosted flakes and raw bananas and cooked bananas, and there's one banana. And it just, for me, that was sort of one of those moments of, okay, things aren't the same anymore. It's time to innovate. Two other things before we end. Tell me about, just speaking of innovating, like you and I, when we were talking a week or two about this, kind of planning it, a phrase that came to me is just realizing what humans are capable of when we are pressed and when we are forced to lean things down, and just seeing some of the amazing things. And one of the things you mentioned was just that you guys, like, you figured out how to make yogurt. Tell me that a little bit about that. Like, you couldn't get yogurt at the store, so you somehow made yogurt. Like, so I thought humans can make yogurt, like,
Yeah. So
not Yoplait, like humans, and other than Yoplait and Dannon, human. You mean I could craft yogurt? Is that of course I'm being
yeah.
hyperbole here, but I just thought that was neat that you made yogurt. And how many thousand things are we capable of if we just think a little bit? Tell us about making yogurt and kind of the idea behind that.
Yeah. So I will say, disclaimer, I didn't make yogurt. I had friends that did.
Okay, yogurt was
I'm
made.
Yeah, I'm more of a, like, I don't really need that. I'm like, but actually, where I went to church in the city, because there were a lot more foreigners there, they had a lot more imported goods.
Mm,
And so, my 7-hour uh, round trip, uh, was also a benefit because I could go there and get things like Greek yogurt that was imported. I could get cheese because you couldn't get that in my town.
wow.
Different things like that. There was a lot of imported goods. I don't really eat cereal, but sometimes you want a comfort from home. So I could get that. It was super, super expensive because it was imported. But again, you realize what a need is and a want is when you got to pay $10 for a box of Cheerios. Is it really a need? And
Wow.
sometimes it is as a comfort from home. But anyway, back to yogurt. Um, I had some friends that made it. I actually had some friends that when they left gave me the yogurt making kit that they had, and I just never did it again because I went to the city and I could get it. But
Mm,
I did start making my own bread, which isn't a
hmm.
novel thing. A lot of people do that even in the United States, but the very limited breads that I had to choose from, I try to eat pretty healthy. And it was like, I don't really know what this is. And,
Right.
it doesn't seem like it's the best thing for me. And would I turn it down if I was starving? 100% no. But I had some friends that gave me a bread maker. So I was able to find like whole wheat flour. I could typically find that online that I could buy. And just all the ingredients that I need. Some were easy to get, some weren't easy to get. So that was something I did. And actually, I enjoyed my bread so much better than a lot of the other breads I've ever bought. So things like that. And, I know people buy herbs or grow herbs a lot as well, but that was something
Mm,
that I did. Some friends gave me a basil plant and I was like, okay, grow some. Now my friends that had that had like a bunch. They had like a little greenhouse in their apartment.
mm,
Again, I'm more of I'll just do without,
yeah.
but some things, yeah, it's just, or even, going to the grocery store. Say I was like, wow, I really need to go. There's no cars out there. I can't get a hold of any drivers, or it's going to be a while. Hey, I got my bicycle. How much stuff do I need? How much stuff can I carry in my backpack?
Mm,
If I only really needed a few things that I could put in my backpack and then I can worry about the rest later, well, I can ride my bike down there. And again, it's not that far, but
yeah.
still, I mean,
Yeah.
we're just used to the hop in the car and go.
Yeah, I love that, and you see that right now. I mean, all of us would probably say we've seen more human beings walking and biking than ever before. I love how it's the idea of I can sit around and complain about my new circumstance, or I can say, well, I have this energy and I have this ability. I mean, God gave me a brain, He gave me arms and legs, and maybe I can do something new and novel and different and adapt. And I love that story of yours. It's sort of like you find out, like, hey, I'm kind of amazing. Like, we're kind of amazing creatures that God made, and we're really capable of amazing stuff. And this time of isolation and want is, I think, hopefully causing us to see that and realize that. Final thought, April, I'd love for you to speak about singleness, loneliness. That was one of the topics that you brought up, and just that, in China and now, I mean, this is very parallel now to people being in isolation, not seeing anybody. We had a staff meeting today, the first real one in 2 months. We just sat there for the first hour of the staff meeting and just looked at each other and talked about our lives. We didn't talk about church at all. And we were all just kind of like, wow, it's great to be together. And it's just realizing that lack of human contact, loneliness, you're single, there's benefits and blessings to that, and there's loneliness. And then being in China, that was magnified. Just talk to us a little bit about that, and maybe some things you've learned that help anyone that's just really struggling with human contact right now, that might encourage them.
Yeah. When I went to China, I had some really great people around me. I had some really great single people around me. I had some really great married people around me. Um, it got really difficult
You can
sometimes
you can
when,
say hi. Abby wants
hi,
to say hi.
Abby. Hi, sweetheart. How are you?
She can't hear you, but she's saying hi.
Oh,
We're
that's
making a
right.
video for the church. All right, say bye. We're going to continue our convo.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You might have
Go
to
ahead,
start the
April. Keep
video
talking.
over.
But yeah, it was
You don't. It's okay.
it was a really cool experience where I honestly believe, well, I don't really know if I was married, would I have gone to China? Because that's a whole different decision and discussion that you have to have with someone. When I was asked if I wanted to go, and then especially when I was asked if I wanted to go back long term, my dog Betty, I didn't have to ask her. She goes wherever I go, as long as she's with me. So, I may not have ever gone, but
Mm,
when you're there, and especially before I had the church there, there were a few other Christians in the village, and my
hmm
friend Carol that was there with me is one of the strongest Christian women I know, and I know some pretty strong Christian women, and she's right up there with all of them.
mm,
And she was, it was a godsend that we were there together, and I honestly believe in her discussing her journey to get there in mind, that God put us together at the same time, but just didn't have the community that I had. And I didn't have the church. I didn't have the Bible studies at first. I didn't have any of those things. And again, like, you're surrounded by work all the time, and
yeah.
mainly couples. And, you know, I not having the ability to go places like you do here, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym and see other people and hang out, or I have these other friends that aren't at work or at church or whatever. You're surrounded by all the same people, and then nobody wants to do anything on a Friday night, because they want to spend time with their spouses. And you're like, I really needed to get out of my apartment and do something different, but nobody wants to go anywhere. And when you go to Chinese restaurants there, it's family style. So if you're going to go by yourself, you're going to get a plate of broccoli for yourself, So it's not as much fun to go alone. A
Mm,
big group of people's good. So anyway, it just got really lonely, and it really taught me the value of my relationships that were here, and even my relationships that were there, how important they were.
hmm
And oftentimes, it was, as because we would FaceTime or have phone conversations from time to time. And you have to set that up in advance, because
Yeah.
like, it's a 12 to 13 hour time difference. So it's not as easy as like, hey, you free in like 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Because you're probably sleeping or I'm
Right.
sleeping. So a lot of times it was setting those up in advance, but sometimes on a Friday night, I might be able to, if I was like feeling sad, I might be able to text, the Janix or the Steeds or someone, like, hey, are you free? And yeah, hey, I am free. You want to
Yeah.
FaceTime real quick? And, reaching out to them, instead of just like feeling lonely, understanding that there are outlets, there are other things that you can do. And even now, I
Good.
it's not the same for married folks, for people with families. But again, when I was in China and I was always surrounded by the same people, I saw all the same people all the time. It's even if you go to your own apartment, it's still difficult when it's like, here's the bus full of my coworkers again.
Right.
So it's not 100% not the same as what families are dealing with now, but I think that there are ways that we can find outlets, because my coworkers in China, same thing. If they had a spouse, that was the person that they saw all the time.
Right.
So learning to have those friendships, even if they're not right there in China, how can I connect with other people?
Mm.
And there were times where I was really, really lonely. There are times now where I am. I do go to work a little bit right now, so I get out and I get to
Hmm.
interact with some other people. Of course, the same people all the time. But yeah, it's saying it really all is about choices. What we said about choosing what I really need, what I want. It's
Yeah.
choosing how you're going to see something like, yes, I'm
Mm.
really lonely. Hey, I can text someone, I can call someone. And believe me, I'm not great at that all the time. I'll sit and wallow in my loneliness sometimes and feel sorry for myself. But I recognize that I'm choosing to
Yeah.
do that. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes I just need to cry. But yeah, I think it's just, um, recognizing that you have that choice. And maybe sometimes you just get your Bible out at that point and you go, okay, Bible roulette. I'm just going to find a chapter and I'm going to read it. And I don't know if it applies to my life right now, but at least I'm just getting into the word, or something. Or sometimes it's binging on Netflix for the night. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the answer.
I love how you stayed connected in that time and when you returned, and even before you returned, but there's a seamlessness. And I've experienced this with a lot of people where we can be apart for a time, but because we've tried to continue building that relationship. And I really think, maybe this is a good closing thing to say, is that the strength of our church relationships when we return from all this stuff to whatever normal becomes will be largely founded on how well we steward these relationships now. If I weren't talking to you with some sort of regularity, even if we're sending little tiny texts throughout the day or sending a Bible verse or a prayer or whatever, it would probably be very awkward if suddenly in 3 or 4 or 5 months, like, oh, April, hey, what's up, there'd be a disconnect. So I think what you're speaking of is just the attempt to try to do what we can. It really will pay dividends in the future. And if nothing else, folks, what you're hearing April say, married, single, whatever situation, is the loneliness is a very real thing, and it's okay if you feel that way. That's what part of what this is doing, and we can grow and learn from that. Um, April, I love talking to you, and we could talk more and more, but we're trying to keep these around a half an hour. We may have eclipsed that a little bit, but that's okay. It has been absolutely delightful talking to you, and I
Yes,
really
thank
appreciate
you.
your time. You want to say any final goodbyes to the church, and I'll close this out.
I'm just going to say something really quick, and you'll have to pardon my tones and my foreign accent. But 我想你们，我爱你们. I miss you and I love you, my church family.
Mm. Amen. What a great closing. Thank you, folks. We hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you at the next video. Enjoy, be encouraged. God bless you.